The Aero Rover is the third rover to release, and we got access to them yesterday. But one thing is abundantly clear to me, and that is that Aero Rover feels unfinished. In their current state, Aero Rover is, by a pretty wide margin, the worst rover of them all, despite having a lot of potential. But why is this? Well, first we have to discuss what the Aero Rover actually does. Their primary role within a team is going to be as a healer. Unlike the Spectra Rover, Aero Rover has healing within their base kit, and its scaling is actually pretty respectable, so you can just use Aero Rover like a full-on healer, and it will not be copium like with Spectra Rover. So that's already a good start, filling a spot within the team that usually doesn't get much competition. So Aero Rover can't be that bad, right? Well, for that we have to look at the rest of Aero Rover's kit. They want to consistently proc their special aerial attacks to generate a lot of forte, and this forte will allow them to use an enhanced resonance skill, but that's purely a means to an end. It's purely so you can trigger the outro skill, except for the enhanced skill, which will be required to proc the secondary effect of the Aero Rover's signature weapon. The outro skill will increase the cap for error erosion stacks by 3, so going from 3 to 6, and the signature weapon will give 10% arrow damage amplification to all characters in the team. This gives Aero Rover some very clear use cases. However, use cases that they cannot exploit yet. Aero Rover is also capable of converting other DOTs into arrow erosion, but because Spectra Rover and Phoebe are the only characters currently capable of inflicting DOTs, you're forced to use a Confession Phoebe. And all that just to apply some arrow erosion, which isn't even that strong when it comes to damage. So everything that makes the Aero Rover unique is something that is entirely unneeded. But let's talk about that a bit later. First, I want to talk about all the reasons why Aero Rover is not good. And the first one I want to talk about is the fact that Aero Rover has no worthwhile utility for any teams that are currently in the game other than GN and Alto. And even in those teams, Aero Rover is not good. A better word to use for this scenario would be usable. Almost all of the utility that Aero Rover gives us is something that we either do not need or something that might come in handy in the future, but could also just be completely worthless. Increasing the cap for arrow erosion is something that I don't really see the point in, to be honest. Arrow erosion is not a good effect. Its damage is not worth trying to build a team around. So why is it something that Aero Rover is capable of doing? Well, the only guess I have is it's going to be strong in a future Aero character, which is probably going to be Cartathea. But all of the evidence we have about current DOT characters in the game, mainly Phoebe, suggests that the amount of stacks won't really be relevant. This might be challenged in the future, but so far, there is no evidence to suggest that increasing the cap for arrow erosion is actually a good thing. And even then, you're most likely going to need a secondary teammate to apply arrow erosion anyway. So Aero Rover is going to be using an entire team slot just to increase the cap of an effect that might not even care about how many stacks it has. And even then, Aero Rover can't even apply arrow erosion on their own. You're going to need a secondary teammate to apply one of the DOT effects. Phoebe is going to be one of your options, but considering the fact that almost all of her buffing is for specifically Spectrofrazzle, I don't see a universe in which Phoebe with Aero Rover is going to be best in slot anywhere, meaning that Aero Rover loses a bunch of the utility that they're supposed to have in their kit. And that's going to be the only niche that Aero Rover is actually going to occupy, because they do not have any other utility on their kit outside of their signature weapon giving 10% damage amplification specifically to Aero. So while it could theoretically work in something like a GN team or an Alto team, in reality you're going to end up losing to Baizha, because 10% damage amplification for only Aero is going to lose out to 15% damage amplification for every element alongside Baizha's pre-existing attack buff. Now, Baizha has issues of her own, being the fact that her rotation, while it is not that long, it is still longer than Shorekeeper and Verena, so you are using quite a bit of time. You also need to actually pick up her attack buff in order to use it, and it only goes towards one character. But even then, Aero Rover doesn't even have any of these, and Aero Rover's rotation is even longer than that of Baizha. Aero Rover might have one of the longest rotations in the entire game when we're talking about a support character. When you are looking at characters like Shorekeeper, Verena, and even Baizha, who all don't cross the 5.5 second mark when it comes to their rotation length, it is a shocker to see that Aero Rover, a character who's supposed to be in the same role, gets to a whopping 7 seconds. And that's honestly kind of ridiculous. Considering all of the universal utility that all of these characters give us, it is kind of a shocker to see that Aero Rover, with even less utility, manages to have a longer rotation time. Even Spectra Rover does not have this problem because you don't actually care about Spectra Rover's outro skill, so you can easily be done with them in less than 4 seconds. However, Aero Rover, because you want their outro skill, doesn't really have this advantage. Even if you did have the advantage of a useless outro skill, we still needed to use their enhanced skill so we can get the arrow damage amplification. And don't even get me started about the first rotation. The first rotation is a complete clunkfest, because the intro skill is incredibly needed for the Forte generation. Not only are you able to use the special heavy attacks right after the intro skill will also generate Forte, meaning that if you don't have the intro skill, you're already losing time, and quite a lot of it as well, because generating Forte without that intro skill is quite cumbersome, because, well, you're gonna need to do a whole extra aerial, and because there's 2 aerials in the sequence, and you also still need to plunge, you're kind of wasting 2 seconds of your time already. So sometimes you have to ask yourself if it's actually worth it at all. And all of that, an Aero Rover doesn't even have the damage output to make it worth it. Assuming you are on a full-on damage build with Aero Rover, you are already going to do less than 100,000 damage, which is less than Sanhua, less than Mortefi, less than essentially any sub-DPS in the business. It's less than Yang Yang for crying out loud. And guess what? It only gets lower when you realize that this character actually needs energy regen. Because without energy regen, you are simply not going to get your ult consistently. I run almost 160%, and even I run into energy issues at times with Aero Rover. So that 100,000 damage that you're doing, in reality you're looking closer to less than 80,000 damage, which, fun fact, is comparable to Tao Chi, and she is infamous for how bad she is. So how can we fix Aero Rover? Well, it's kind of hard to do. They already have a quote-unquote signature set that they're not even able to proc. They also already have a signature echo, which is purely focused on Aero Rover's personal damage. So in reality, the most common ways to buff a character without introducing new characters are already used and didn't do the job. So what are we looking at when we're trying to buff Aero Rover? Well, what I think we're gonna need is just new characters. Characters who are capable of exploiting arrow erosion, but also characters that want to apply other DOTs but are still able to support arrow erosion. Aero Rover's ability to turn things like Spectrofrazzle or Havoc Bane into arrow erosion is one that we just aren't able to exploit, and once we get characters who actually want arrow erosion, chances are we're also going to get characters who are able to apply arrow erosion on their own, meaning that Aero Rover's value is completely restricted to increasing the cap for arrow erosion. But if we get a character who's able to apply something like Spectrofrazzle or Havoc Bane, while also providing other effects that will be useful towards an arrow erosion team, we can start seeing this ability be actually useful, as it will allow for an alternative team that isn't just this arrow erosion DPS, Aero Rover, and then the arrow erosion applicant. But what do you think of the Aero Rover? I've personally been having quite a lot of fun playing them. I just wish they were better and had actual teams to be played in. But outside of that, I've been having a lot of fun. Let me know in the comments below what your opinion is of the Aero Rover. If you have any questions, be sure to join my Discord. in which I'll be answering any questions you may have. Also, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. But that'll be it from me. Peace.